Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, July 17th, 2025, and today we're going to talk about how to use row cover with sensitive crops, preparing for extremes, and finding jobs on farms. Not all at once, you can do those things separately. Anyway, let's do it. All right, happy Thursday, everyone. I hope you all have had relatively good weeks so far. It's almost over, at least the main part of the week. And fair warning, this has nothing to do with farming, but I was reading this article yesterday in the New York Times called "The Kids Are All Right, Just Not at a Brewery." Family-friendly breweries across the country are reconsidering their relationship with children and, in some cases, banning them outright. And, well, that subtitle obviously gives away what much of the story is about, but I thought it was a very interesting read. Even though I don't drink anymore, I really, really loved having breweries as a kid-friendly option for a place where we could go, we could get a bite to eat, we could have a beer and let the kids kind of play and run around. But this article talks a lot about how kids have, in many cases, just become a safety issue for many brewery owners. Just basically, people just are often going to a brewery and kind of letting their kids run rampant. So I guess this is my PSA, just to say, please mind the kiddos so the breweries will stay kid-friendly, because for real, that is a great social option for parents, and shouts to all the breweries who embrace, the kid-friendly stuff. But I also totally understand for the breweries who don't. But anyway, yeah, how about some farm stuff now? As has become the tradition on Thursdays, we are going to tackle 3 Patreon questions to continue getting caught up over there. Our first Patreon question comes to us from Andy Novak at Mother Farmer, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse, longtime listener, first-time caller, as the outdated saying goes." I don't know if it's outdated. I think that one's timeless. "My wife and I run Mother Farmer, located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Zone 4. Our last frost date is early June, with planting beginning in earnest in late April/early May. My question is about using row cover in the spring. I know row covers is obvious use for frost protection, but I'd like to dive more into using it in the spring to protect young seedlings. It's early June when writing this and seems to be past frost, but we're continuing to experience cool nights in the 40s, even upper 30s. I'm continuing to cover things like tomatoes and peppers, even though they're in tunnels. And until recently, I had been covering most things outdoors as well, even hardy brassicas, just to be safe. Is this necessary/beneficial, or am I just creating unnecessary evening chores? I faintly remember hearing somewhere that tomatoes can have their growth stunted with cooler weather, even if it's not frosty. Are there temperature thresholds that you use as guidance for row cover outside of the obvious frost thresholds? Thank you for all your hard work in getting this amazing and useful information out to the masses." End quote. All right, thank you. And I know it's somewhat late now, but hopefully our friends in the Southern Hemisphere gearing up for their springs, or just the rest of us for next spring, will benefit, because this is a great question. So basically, even if it's not necessarily frosty when the temperatures aren't, but they're still cold, is it worth still covering certain crops? And at what point is that not worth it or needed? So I'm going to do field and tunnel tomatoes, since not everyone listening will have tunnel for their tomatoes. For field tomatoes, I recommend covering them at night when the temps are below 50 degrees or 10 Celsius. For tunnel tomatoes, you have a little more leeway because the soil will radiate more warmth, but also you don't want to risk disease, so you try to cover them as little as possible overnight to ensure airflow. So I wouldn't cover tunnel tomatoes until around 40 degrees or 4.5 degrees Celsius. And honestly, you could probably even go a little lower than that, just depending on how warm it's been leading up to it. Now, what can happen, assuming the field tomatoes don't just get hit by annoying patchy frost that happen just under 40 degrees, is that they can start to go into generative growth, fruit-producing growth, that is, when they get too cold. So the cold doesn't stunt their growth exactly as much as it kind of tells them, dude, it's about to be winter. You got to fruit or die. So the tomato plants will oblige. In fact, some professional growers will use this reactive mechanism in the tomato plants to encourage them to put on substantial amounts of fruit, called crop steering. You can look that up. I think Andrew Mefford wrote about it somewhat in his book, The Greenhouse and Hoop House Grower's Handbook. Good book. And they do that by, for instance, opening the sides of a tunnel on cooler nights to kind of just shock the tomatoes a little bit into producing a little bit more. And of course, it's more nuanced than that, but that's the idea. Expose the plants to cold to encourage more fruiting. In your case, in the tunnel, this cold may indeed cause the plants to slow up a little bit because it's beginning to focus on generative growth rather than vegetative growth, which in the spring, the vegetative growth is kind of what you're after, just to get those plants going and growing. Row covers will also just keep things warmer, including the soil. So as I've said before, I will utilize row cover in the late winter just to get the soil temps up so that I can plant some of those warmer weather crops without them going into too cold of soils. That can also help to germinate any weed seeds that might be there so that you can kind of knock those out with a hoe or whatever. For crops like lettuce, broccoli, etc., it's probably overkill covering and uncovering unless you anticipate a frost, especially in a tunnel. Those do not need to be covered until closer to freezing temperatures for the brassicas and pretty much down to 25 or below for the lettuce. Broccoli and cauliflower can button up, basically create a mini head if they get frosted too hard too early. So I like to cover those if there's a small chance, and definitely if they're in the field and they have a head growing on them, it's good to cover them just so that head doesn't get damaged by the frost. And honestly, if it's not going to get too hot that day, allowing the row cover to just stay over top of the crops in the fields is usually fine through the colder periods, especially if it's not super heavy types like the R50. I prefer R30. You're less likely to run into airflow issues when it's out just like in the field, even with row cover on it. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. And up next, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll seek some farm jobs together. BRB. All right, so how about a quick Milpa garden update? For those of you watching on YouTube, you can kind of see there's like corn and sunflowers and dry beans over on these beds, right? And it's kind of basically like skip a bed. And in the middle, you have the winter squash. It looks pretty good. I mean, there's a few spots that need some cultivation, just some spot weeding. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with the growth here. I mean, it's a little random. Some spots are doing better than others, but it is very cool looking, and I'm very excited to see how this goes. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe, but what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's second Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Esteban Felix, who writes, quote, "As a recent graduate with a degree in horticulture and marketing," that's a nice combo, "I desperately need some help. I don't know the farm industry well enough to look for a job where I can make a difference. I want to help market gardeners market their products and or work in distribution to sell those products. I realize that this might be out of your wheelhouse, but what positions do you think I should be applying for, and where should I be applying? Not ready to start my own farm yet, but I still want to work in the industry and help the most that I can. Long-term listener and love what you are doing," end quote. All right, great question here, Esteban. Thank you. And it feels like something that I don't think we've really tackled this. Anyway, it sounds to some extent like you are not necessarily looking to work out like on the field side of things of the farm, but rather the marketing side. Now, I will say that most market farms that I know do not have a marketing position per se. Someone whose sole job it is to handle the marketing and, talking to customers, finding new customers, all that stuff. By and large, that task falls on the farmers with a smattering of help from employees. But many market farms do have farmers market managers, people who literally manage the farmers market. They tend to the market, handle the customer service and all of that sort of stuff, and coordinate with the farmers. However, this is usually a 1 or 2 day a week job, and it's usually Saturdays from early mornings until early afternoon, possibly with Sundays or maybe one other day during the week. Delivery drivers are also an area of need for some farms, taking orders to restaurants and retail places and that sort of stuff. I know you have a degree in marketing, and what I'm describing here is not typically super high paying jobs that are generally filled by pre-degree college students looking for a little extra cash over the summer. But that doesn't mean it can't become a great side gig and a way to break into the market farming world and to understand it a little bit better. I often say that farming is not about growing the food. It is about selling it. That is actually what we do, because all of the cool stuff one does on a farm is for naught if they can't actually get the produce to the customer. But making enough money to put money into marketing is a challenge because margins are slim in farming. Anyway, those positions could, depending on the farm, be parlayed into a greater market marketing position if you could help figure out ways to make it more valuable to the farmers, handling the communication between clients, for instance, the fresh sheets, finding new clients, all those things. Some farmers could certainly use someone doing those tasks for them, absolutely. It's just that by and large, most farms can't afford it. So where to find any job in that realm? Well, first, I would start with just going to the farmer's market in your area and where, at least in the area where you want to work, and just talking with the staff at the individual booths. Pick out a farm or two that look like they're your speed and shoot them an email and a resume, or bring them one. Tell them what you're interested in. You can also use the forum at no-tillgrowers.com to just connect with farmers in the area you want to work. The farmers might also be at the farmers market, and you can chat with them there. Just obviously don't interrupt sales. That's probably not going to be the right way to put your foot in the door. Towards the end of the market day is usually the best for chatting with farmers as they're wound down or as they're starting to clean up. Now, again, most market farms do not have a marketing department, and farming, the farmer is more often than not the marketing department. The budget for that is just generally, like I said, non-existent, which is sad, but the reality of the business that relies so heavily on tight margins. In terms of farm positions, farmers generally need help in the fields, in the wash pack station, and at the farmer's market, and maybe like delivery drivers for certain size farms or certain farms that serve certain markets. Honestly, though, if you can bring a little marketing savvy to one of those areas or all of them, then you could really help that farm, maybe even help to grow it to a point where they could have a marketing person. Anyway, was any of that helpful? I don't know. I certainly hope so. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, preparing farms for extremes when extremes are the norm. Be right back.
Hi, this is Doug at a quarter-acre production garden at a high school on the Olympic Peninsula, and we grow food for school lunches and local food banks.
Hey everybody, Mike here, Think Little Farm, Kentucky, Zone 6B. I am in the process of starting my farm and my gardens. We got tarps down, we got that. That's a prop house. And things are going well. It's raining right now, so you can't really complain. Anyway, shout out to you all. Peace.
All right, our third and final Patreon question of the day comes to us from Norsk Guard Farm, who writes, quote, just to comment on managing extremes, this experience we are having with the excessive rain certainly leads to solutions associated with managing extremes. Now, too much water. Where sloping might have been mitigated to have flat beds in greenhouses and required flat areas when applying for greenhouse grant programs, these flat areas could and have led to flooding and runoff even when flat. So we'll add drainage tile between plots, maybe a slightly elevated bed relative to the path, but I cannot help think that a drought still needs to be considered for water storage. I know of some small-scale farming outside of Sedona that created sunk beds for collection of rainwater and other protections of their climate, of which I have no practical experience. Should we be managing for extremes? Any insight into applying the 80-20 principle for choosing our battles? I suppose it is a variation of an exit strategy for the business, but a seasonal exit strategy. I've not given up yet, but looking X steps ahead, it enters the realm of possibilities. I'll be 63 this November. I have some safety net and one other business, but man, it's disheartening when your freshly planted asparagus is sitting in a puddle of water, wilting. Forget about the other root crops. I 100% appreciate you. End quote. Okay, so thank you, and I appreciate you 100%. It is a good and big question. Effectively, how much do we need to prepare our farms for extremes, and which extremes take precedence? Because the same place that can have a drought can have a flood, sometimes within the same year. And bringing the Pareto principle into it, the 80-20 rule they referred to here, is interesting. It's kind of I hadn't thought about it this way. So to back up, the 80-20 rule is effectively that 80% of results come from 20% of your efforts. It's often used in businesses that, like, for instance, look at their numbers and see that 80% of their sales are actually coming from 20% of their customers, or 80% of their profits are actually coming from 20% of their products. Like for us, maybe that's like lettuce. Lettuce is the driver of our farm and has been for years. 80% of is somewhat arbitrary, and it doesn't quite make up that much of our sales depending on the year, but a huge percentage. And when you couple that with cherry tomatoes, those two probably do make up like 20% of our work and do bring in 80% of our revenue. Again, depending on the year and where we're selling and all those things. Anyway, maybe this principle is more of a subject for another time, but how does that principle relate to farming and resilience? Well, I think one part of it could be something like soil organic matter. Building and improving soil organic matter will address both droughts and heavy rainfalls to some extent by releasing excess water in wet times and holding it in dry times. Site preparation, getting a farm ready in the very beginning is something you will only ever really do, well, you hopefully only really ever do once in the beginning of the farm. So that can have a huge effect on climate extremes, right? You have the drainage ready for the 1,000-year floods that no longer are waiting 1,000 years, and the irrigation ready for the extended droughts. We are seeing increases in strong wind events as well, so adding stabilizing elements to the tunnel could also be one of these small efforts that makes a huge percentage of the climate mitigation, and it can be a small cost in comparison to losing a high tunnel. There is no perfect answer here, and every climate is going to be different, but extremes are now the norm. We've seen all the flooding over the last 2 weeks in Texas, North Carolina, and New Jersey, and we haven't even entered hurricane season yet, so there's definitely more to come there. The wildfires in California and the rest of the West. Hoping those won't hit your farm obviously is not an action plan. We are having more wildfires, more extreme weather. Assume it's just a matter of time and find ways to protect your property. Whatever the most extreme thing that has any potential of happening in your region should be considered to some extent when setting up a farm. And oftentimes it doesn't take a ton of effort to mitigate those. It just takes some planning. Like floodplains are out of the picture for me. You don't plan to put your gardens there, even if that is where the best soil lives, because even if it is not flooded in your lifetime or your parents' lifetime, it can and will flood if it's in a floodplain. Other regional issues like fires and wind will take more thought. So I don't know if that was helpful, Bill, but if you are mitigating some of that with the drainage and securing the water with good irrigation and collection, plus taking care of the soil, raising the beds, as you mentioned, all of those things, then I think you are on the right track. At least you're thinking about it the right way. It's just difficult. It feels like a weird time to be having these conversations because the more sensible land management that we can get into action, the more climate mitigation we will see. But those farms have to survive the extreme weather, which is getting harder and harder to do. It's becoming like a climate catch-22. But I'm hopeful things will change if we continue to do this kind of work. Anyway, I will let others put their 2 cents in the comment section while I mosey on out of this Thursday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a 501c3 nonprofit, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeden for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat, corduroy, very cool. Or a copy of the Living Soil Handbook from notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of July, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Peter Dirks. Awesome, Peter. To the rescue for this story. All right, so this is the one of the man who has to figure out how to alert the actor or the powers that be that this actor is in danger for his life. He knows this because, as you will remember, he woke up an assassin with all the information of how it was going to go down floating around in his head, which very uncomfortable. Sure, he could put an anonymous call into the police in Las Vegas and wash his hands of this whole ordeal, but after a lifetime of having your brain filled with, new professions every day, you become a little paranoid, as it seems, about the world finding out about this particular skill or special ability he has, curse maybe. So he decides he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want anything leading back to him. With that plot hole conveniently filled, he decides instead to head to Vegas and use whatever skills he has to save the actor himself. On that morning, of course, he could have woken up with something useful, a window washer, a blackjack dealer. Maybe it'd get him a little bit closer to the action, or maybe like a security guard, and he'd be like, and know some moves, or like a taekwondo master or something. But no, what skills he will bring into this challenge, well, that is for tomorrow in this exciting conclusion of The Mind MacGyver. Dang it. It's another reference to an old show, but it's so perfect. Maybe it's like a spinoff. It's a MacGyver spinoff. Maybe it's just like MacGyver in another dimension. Yeah, we'll roll with that. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you then. Bye.